All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar. I'm Ashley Limbers, the marketing lead here at Encompass Solutions, and I'm happy to be your moderator for this session. For those of you who are new to Encompass, let me give you a quick introduction. We're a North Carolina-based ERP consulting and implementation firm with over 25 years in business, and we have a global team of just over 40 staff members. We focus exclusively on serving the manufacturing and distribution industries, delivering solutions that help organizations streamline operations, overcome challenges, and drive growth. And as a premier partner of Epicor, we have nearly 2 decades of experience delivering tailored ERP systems. What truly sets us apart is we are our partner first mindset. We don't just implement software, we work closely with our clients to ensure their ERP solutions are tailored, optimized, and aligned with their business goals. In today's session, we are focusing on AI tools at work, presented by our financial and operations consultant, John Sherry. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent to all registrants afterwards. And if you have any questions during today's presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel, and we'll answer as many as we can during the live Q&A at the end. And lastly, we'd appreciate it if you could take a minute to fill out the quick survey after the session. It helps us keep improving these events for you. So now let's turn things over to our presenter, John Sherry. Help me give him a warm welcome. John has over 10 years of experience working directly in oil and gas manufacturing and healthcare industries, working in various technical leadership roles in small $1 million plus to large $1 billion in plus scale supply chains. He possesses a strong background in manufacturing from both frontline and management perspectives, working his way up from material handler to an operations manager in his time in the industry, as well as fulfilling duties in process improvement. John has business process improvement experience with Epicor 9, 10, and Kinetic, and upgrading experience from all versions of Epicor to Kinetic and implementations of Kinetic. And while John cut his teeth in the operations world, he has been active on the financial side, assisting customers with chart of accounts creation, AP and AR setup and training, bank reconciliation training, cash management, GL training, and more. John is our AI guru, and he also has extensive experience with Epicor's DMT and is always happy to help a client with their data needs. So we're excited to have John with us today. So John, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Appreciate it, Ashley. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As you guys are aware, we're going to be talking about AI today. A portion of that is we're going to talk about kind of AI versus RPA. Robotic process automation is what RPA is, and kind of taking a look at what's the difference between AI, what's the difference between automating processes and AI. They're not the same thing. I'm gonna walk you guys through a bit of what my daily workflow looks like, and then some common pitfalls, some things to avoid, things to keep in mind as we're using AI, making sure we're staying compliant, both from, maybe like Sarbanes-Oxley or other government regulations that we have in different industries. So I wanted to start off, and I kind of wanted to give you guys an overview of how I use AI and in my work. This is more of a solidified workflow that I use personally. So, Fathom AI, and there are others like it, Otter, and some other ones. It joins meetings and it automatically will take notes for you, right? So, Fathom AI can come in, record and summarize your meetings automatically. Depending upon if you have a paid subscription to it or free, it can also generate action items and highlight kind of key points throughout the meeting for you. There's even the actual recording itself so that you can rewatch it as well. So you don't necessarily have to record on Teams or Google Meet if you're wanting to keep it for a personal thing. So the way my flow goes is Fathom AI takes my notes. You get an email from Fathom when the recording is done, basically. And so then I take Power Automate, and what that does is it extracts the Fathom summaries and compiles them into clean text blocks so that I can then dump that into you can use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever else. And basically, what that'll do for me is it'll transform that summary into a polished activity report. I can create agendas, workshops, and implementation plans even with it. And then I can also keep it back as a searchable personal knowledge base. So Power Automate itself is RPA, right? That's a robotic process automation, and basically what it does is it takes well-defined workflows and it executes it automatically for you. So I think something that people confuse a bit when we talk about AI is they think AI is the automation tool. There is some automation that goes along with AI, but typically when we're talking about well-defined tasks, we should be using RPA. Most people have Microsoft 365, right, as a tool for work, and Power Automate is part of that. It's a very simple tool to kind of learn and use. I'm not even using it to its full potential, but this is what I use that works for my personal workflows to be able to pull this stuff out. I'll talk a little bit more about ChatGPT and how I use the searchable knowledge base that I've built for myself. But again, even with all of this, it's important to note that you need to kind of oversee the outputs that are being generated by these tools because it's not going to be right. And you have to know what you're talking about to know that it's not right because AI loves to be confidently wrong, right? So it's just something to keep in mind when we start using these tools. And if you use a similar workflow as me on this, then you need to be aware of what's kind of going on there. So let's talk about the strategic gap in AI adoptions. I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with the news, but many companies are actually losing money implementing AI because they aren't deploying it with a defined strategy. AI is a hot buzzword right now. We actually have quite a few people on here, largely probably because AI was mentioned. And everybody's quick to want to move to use this stuff. But when you don't understand how to use the tools, it actually ends up costing you more time trying to figure out where things went wrong rather than if you had just done it yourself manually. So it's important to remember that, AI really is not going to be a replacement for human judgment, right? I'm alluding to those hallucinations that AI can have, but it is a force multiplier for human capability. So turning your average speed worker, and you can turn them into a worker that works at elite speeds if we're using AI correctly. Some of the common mistakes here, no workflow integration or defined use case, people just kind of using it willy-nilly. Over reliance on AI generated content without review. Everybody's guilty of this. When you first start using AI, you're like, this is fantastic. It's going to save me so much time. And you just kind of trust what it says because you skimmed it and it sounded good. But then when you look at it, there's very clearly some mistakes that come along with it. And then lack of training and adoption plans as well. When I say training, I don't mean just training your end users on how to use it, although obviously that is very important. But you can also train your AI, right? I think most people are aware of this at this point. But you can train your AI to write the way you want it to write, for it to use logic the way you want it to use logic. And so not only do we need to train our end users on how to correctly write prompts and set up the results or the output from the AI the way that we want it to, we also need to keep in mind that as we use AI, it's continuously learning. And so we need to keep a firm grasp on how we're going to train the AI itself to give us the results that we want. So at the end of the day, strategic AI use is going to start with clear goals, repeatable processes, and then most importantly, again, human oversight. We're not replacing the human component here. All we're doing is enhancing it. So again, I've said this already, it amplifies expertise. It's not going to replace it. Realistically, our best outcomes come from collaboration. So humans, ideally, not always, but humans ideally are going to bring the ethics, the creativity, and the context for the outputs that we need. And then AI is going to be able to deliver that at scale for us, speed, consistency, and scale. The consistency can be, a little hit or miss here and there, but the more that you train the AI, the more you're going to get those consistent results over and over again. and then using the AI to actually enhance the decision making, helping us, look at reports and be able to identify trends in data and things like that. Those are things that AI is great at. But again, if we just allow AI to run on its own, it will make some wild suggestions or things like that. We've seen stuff in the news about it. So, one thing that I don't think gets talked about enough when we're discussing AI is actually protecting our customer data. Okay. It's real easy to come out of a meeting and be like, hey, I want this to be summarized, and then I'm going to use Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or your flavor of the month new AI. And I want to take that information and I want to create a report out of it or, whatever other output you're trying to get from it. But the thing to note is that when we're doing this, right, AI is not going to necessarily protect that customer information, right? So we shouldn't be inputting any kind of confidential customer information into our AI tools. There are, and I'll talk about this later, there are enterprise options where the security and data security is more in line with what companies would use. But if we're using this on a personal basis, which is what I find most end users end up doing, even if they are using it for work, we want to make sure that no confidential customer information goes directly into AI tools. So don't be putting customer like bill of materials or proprietary information into the tools because that data isn't secure in that manner. If you are going to use and you need to use it to kind of build out a plan because it's something that is a lot of data for you to handle or you just haven't dealt with it and you're trying to get a kind of better picture for yourself so that you can refine it, make sure you either anonymize or redact the data. Missed a D in there, so not reacted, redacted data. um, Always confirm that any platforms we're using, whether that's Fathom or one of our, ChatGPTs or another note taker, make sure it meets any kind of compliance standards, GDPR, SOC, SOC 2, anything to do with ITAR, stuff like that. Make sure that we're always in compliance. Only store sensitive data in approved company systems. And then your company itself needs to make sure that we define what is considered safe to share with AI. It needs to be a company policy and it needs to be enforced, right? I'm not saying fire somebody if they make a mistake with this, but do make sure that it's enforced, that there is training behind that, like any other compliance that we have, because more and more we're seeing that data leaks and proprietary information leaks are a bigger and bigger problem. And another thing that isn't talked about enough is having bad actors use AI to develop new, stronger, more complex viruses, right? To be able to get in and steal our data. So again, staying on top of phishing attempts and the other things that can happen behind this. We're moving into a brave new world when it comes to technology, yet again. And we just need to make sure that we're prepared for the kind of stuff that can come our way. So make sure we have a plan, make sure it's enforced, and make sure that everybody in the company understands how we're going to be handling these situations. So let's talk about prompting, right? So this is going to be more for like ChatGPT and Claude, and those tools. But to get consistent, high quality results, we're going to want to be specific in structure. So we want to include any kind of role, context, and outcome. So, for instance, when I'm using AI for work, I'll use ChatGPT as an example. I would pull up my ChatGPT, I would go into a chat, and I would say, "Hey, I am an ERP implementation consultant. This is the situation that I am working on. I need to create an agenda for, say, going through production management in Epicor, Kinetic, or something along those lines." Um, and giving it the full context, I'm working with a rubber manufacturer and they are, ISO compliant or whatever else. And then you can basically build your agenda out based off of those things. You'll get a good output to start with, and then you can edit it down to what you need it to be. But you really do need to be as highly specific with all context and your desired outcomes as possible because the AI will read into it and try and reason itself. And oftentimes, if your prompt isn't strict enough, it'll go kind of off the rails a little bit and start doing stuff you may not want it to do. For instance, it may also try and create a financial agenda when I was really just looking for an operations agenda, right? Can be something small, could be something large where you have to completely restart on the prompt. Feeding examples. So AI definitely performs best when you show it your preferred style. So going back to creating agendas or activity reports, I actually took I've been a long time student, actually wrapping up my master's in accountancy this month, but I already hold an MBA as well. And so as you guys can imagine, I've written quite a few papers for college. And so what I actually did was I went and took some of my old schoolwork and I uploaded my papers to ChatGPT and I told it, hey, this is my style of writing. This is the way I explain things. This is my tone. When you write agendas and activity reports, when you draft them, I want you to write these items in my tone, the way I speak and the way I address stuff, including kind of like sentence structure. So don't be using 32 syllable words when most of the time I speak in 2 to 5 syllable words, stuff like that. It keeps it from sounding too pedantic and it will keep you from having output that really sounds like AI when it sounds like me, right? It's a really strong tool when you start giving examples of how you want it to give output. The next thing is iteration. So we need to treat our outputs as drafts, not final results. A lot of times you're going to have to tweak it, and there's an iteration process to it. But you're able to output large files very quickly with the iteration because it can write that stuff much quicker than you ever could. You can make some small edits, re-upload it, and say, hey, now I also want you to do this or add this type of formatting, wherever the case may be. But just remember that it's iterations, iterations, iterations until you get to the final product. If you see something weird or something that may not be right, asking for the rationale from the AI helps it be accurate and more transparent because if you ask it like, hey, I don't think that's right because XYZ, it will actually rerun an analysis on that portion and it will ideally correct itself. Sometimes it corrects itself with wrong information again, but it will correct itself if you ask it to give rationale, provide sources, those types of things. And then keeping a prompt library, right? So if you have successful prompts for outputs of material, save them, right? You can archive chats directly in your AI, or if you're a company, you could have something on like SharePoint or something like that, a successful prompt folder for different types of files or outputs that you need to have. That way, everybody can go in and grab a prompt and use it, and we can get consistent results that we want to deliver to our end customers. Um, this slide got put out of order, so we're going to skip past this. I think we already know this, but we're understanding where AI adds value, how to adopt it responsibly, and whatnot. So let's talk about a real workflow from meeting to actions to execution. So number one, this is kind of the fathom piece, right? So we capture the meeting recording plus a transcription plus our summary. We're then going to normalize that content, so convert that summary into structured tasks and store those wherever we want to store them. And then we're going to execute. So automate our follow-ups. That this is where Fathom can create your action items, send emails, any kind of CRM updates, ERP tickets, those kind of things. We can interface, whether through API or, sending an email and then having a human act on it, however you want to do that, and then learn. This is always the most important part, but using feedback loops, so humans correcting our outputs and prompts or templates, improving those things and refining them as we go along. This is, again, continuous improvement like anything else in business. So we just want to make sure that we treat it that way and not as just a plug and play. This is not the same as downloading Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel and things always work the way they work. AIs are growing growing tool, and we should grow with it. So, evidence of impacts, and I do have sources for these studies, and so it will be included with the slideshow. If you guys have questions or want to see where I was pulling my information from, I'm more than happy to share that with you directly as well, if you reach out. But productivity gains are measurable for specific tasks. Okay, so writing, coding to an extent. I know developers may cringe a little bit when I say that. My brother and I talk about this all the time. He's a software dev. Um, if you use it effectively to code, it's great. Vibe coding, mm, wouldn't necessarily trust that 100%, right? But for deliverable outputs like that, the productivity gains are actually measurable. There's real returns on that. The largest lift actually often comes for newer and less experienced workers, right? The people who maybe don't know how to get started, but once they get started, then they're actually quite productive, right? I think the hardest thing when you're a new worker in a place, or starting in a new career is just not knowing where to start, kind of having your wheels stuck in the mud a bit. AI is great for kind of getting you out of that rut and getting you moving. And that's actually where we see industry wide or really everywhere with AI is that it gets our newer, less experienced workers up to speed a lot quicker. Our experts actually tend to spend more time correcting the output from AI than if they had just gone and done it themselves because they already have that base knowledge that the newer workers do not have. Quality actually improved where AI is used as a draft assistant and then we review. So not just pumping stuff out. I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but there was a study about a lawyer who got disbarred for using ChatGPT um, twice with the same judge when he's already warned about doing it once, right? So it's important that we go back and review the information. But AI gives us really good structure and it gives us a lot of information very quickly. And so the quality actually improves when using AI to draft these outputs that we're going to have. Now, there is a risk, right? When people just blindly trust the AI outputs. And this is where newer, less experienced workers can get into a bit of a bind, right? Because they may not know better. So very important that when we have newer people using these AI tools, that everything is being reviewed. There doesn't necessarily need to be a senior reviewing it all the time, but definitely need to review kind of early on the type of outputs that they're using and what items we need to make sure that they pay extra attention to when using our AI. So let's talk about some tech stack options for everyday AI. There's more than this, right? These are just kind of examples. You can always look into more of what you guys are trying to do for your own business. But for meeting intelligence, so Fathom can integrate with Teams and Zoom. You have Otter, Firefly. It just kind of based on what you guys like, how you like to use it. I see a lot of people using Otter. It's great. I really love Fathom because of the way it breaks down and integrates with the stuff that I use. But those all integrate together with our meetings to get the recordings and get the information and action items out of it. Automation, these are your RPAs, right? So Power Automate is probably the one that most people are familiar with. You also have UiPath. UiPath is, I think, flying a little bit under the radar, but they are actually integrated with quite large companies. I believe PepsiCo is one of their customers. And they also do kind of those automation tasks where they could automate, say, AR entry or AP entry or sales order PO, depending on your workflow. And then you also have Zapier to do that as well. And so basically what you're looking at here is there's a trigger to make the bot do what it's going to do. So that trigger might be an email from a customer saying, hey, here's PO 12345 for items, whatever, at for like a quantity of 10 for a price of $1,000. And then basically what this bot would do is it would take that email It would go, as long as you have the API for it, it would go to your ERP or CRM. It would create that sales order automatically for you and then return that sales order acknowledgement directly to the customer. So it transforms that email into a action in your ERP and then can wrap up by getting that acknowledgement back out to your customer without you really having to do anything at all other than having a working inbox. For assistance. So you have ChatGPT that has enterprise options. You have Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, Claude. You choose these based on it could be data boundaries depending upon what integrations you're even allowed to use. There's different use cases for it. So ChatGPT is great to be like a super overpowered Google, right? I find that Claude is more accurate when we're doing more technical stuff. So when I'm reviewing accounting information for my master's degree, I pretty much exclusively use Claude because it's better than ChatGPT at those types of things. So just something to keep in mind. Do your due diligence on the use case for you. The different AI tools are better at different things than each other. They're always improving, but you go out there, you need to do research on what's best for your use case. So knowledge, obviously we have SharePoint, OneDrive, Confluence, a RAG layer, setting your permissions. This is really just where we're going to store stuff. Obviously none of that's actually AI, but it is part of the stack that you would use to interact with the AI. And then you have your governance, so your single sign-ons, RBAC, DLP per view, logging, prompt, and output review. So again, making sure that we're governing the AI, how we're using it, what it has access to, and how it's going to access and when with our different um, data points. So let's talk about where human oversight is non-negotiable because I know people really want to automate as much as possible. Um, so decisions with financial, legal, HR, safety, or customer impacting consequences, you have to have human oversight. Um, One thing that I know people are eager and talk about, oh, we can like eliminate, consultants or accountants or all these different things that you hear from the big CEO overlords in tech. Um, One thing to keep in mind is that stuff that requires ethical decision making should always be in the realm of humans, right? That's something that is too easily manipulated with robots and stuff. Not that humans aren't able to be manipulated, but we have a higher degree of reliability when it comes to stuff like that. We know who's making the decisions and when, and we can have something held accountable. Whereas with bots, you're going to have people trying to put their hands up and be like, well, you just didn't use it as designed. So make sure that we have human oversight in those critical decision making processes. Any output that can create commitments, right? So I just talked about, POs and sales orders and taking bots and having those things automated. But when we talk about quotes, contracts, promise dates, we definitely want to have humans reviewing that to make sure that we're not getting ourselves into a binding contract because AI or some automated tool made a mistake because we pointed it to the wrong data field, or in the case of AI, it just hallucinated and threw something crazy into the contract. So again, make sure that we're reviewing that. Data interpretation. So any kind of KPI narratives, forecasts, root cause analysis. AI is great. It's going to dump out a lot of information for you. It can do analysis really, really well. It's a very strong tool with data analysis. I think it's actually its best use case when we're looking at KPIs and forecasts and those kinds of things. But again, it can make mistakes. So we just need to make sure that there's human review, that we look into the numbers, make sure it makes sense, that the data it pulled was the right data to be pulled, and that it's actually making decisions based on the direction that we want our company to go and not just kind of this overarching industry led analysis. Any kind of edge cases or exceptions where confidence is low or the data is incomplete, you might as well not even use AI, right? If your confidence is low that the data isn't good, all that's going to happen is AI will amplify bad data. It's similar to when you implement an ERP. If you put trash in, you're going to get trash out, except for AI takes that and multiplies it by like 10, right? So important to know that if we're going to use incomplete or bad data, then just know that you're probably going to get a bad output unless you get a miracle. And then always require source links or system of record evidence for facts. So when I get some type of obscure question from a client that I haven't run into before, like let's say something around scheduling, for instance, if you have technical information from your company or technical information from whatever it is you're trying to look into, one of the best practices you can do is to upload that technical information into the AI tool and say, and when you ask it the question that you're trying to find the answer to, you say, hey, I want you to only base your answer off of this technical documentation that I just gave you. And I have actually yet to run into an instance where it was wrong when I do that. I'm not saying it's impossible for it to be wrong. I'm sure it can be. But I personally have not run into where it's been wrong because I'll go back into the technical documentation and verify what it's telling me. And that's been a very effective way for me to dig into the more obscure areas of the ERP, and it's really leveled me up as a consultant. So just require those source links, systems of record evidence for any of our facts that AI is trying to give us. So let's talk about a responsible adoption playbook and some of the pitfalls that we need to avoid when we're using AI. So we always recommend starting with maybe 3 to 5 high volume workflows. So not just implementing AI everywhere in your company, but look at 3 to 5 that you can say, hey, if we automate this and remove some of the human labor here, then we'll get a lot more value in other areas where humans need to make critical decision making. So one thing I like to talk about is kind of like POs, right? If we get a PO or a sales order rather, we get a PO from a customer, then what's the real value in having a human convert exactly what's in an email into a sales order to go back out to a customer, right? Probably not a whole lot. We're taking the same exact information that they already sent us. It's a contract, right? And we put it into the sales order and we send it out, assuming that we accept the PO terms. So automating something like that where we have high volume and then you can have your sales reps or your buyers, if you're on the flip side of this, focusing more on contract negotiation, getting those prices down, stuff like that. Um, Focus on 3 to 5 of those high volume workflows where we benefit more from humans focusing on other areas in our business. To go along with that, we need to define our success metrics. So that could be something like cycle time, rework percentage, throughput, compliance incidents, whatever the success metrics may be, we need to highly define those just like we would with any business SMART goal. And make sure that we're evaluating that over time to make sure that those metrics are actually improving. Because if the metrics aren't improving, then we're wasting our time. Design our human in the loop checkpoints. So this is both for AI and RPA. There needs to be human in the loop. There are very few things that you're going to fully automate without having a human actually oversee it. Otherwise, you're going to run into some critical mistakes that didn't get caught until it's too late. But make sure that we design our human in the loop checkpoints so that we know that the information going out is good. Maybe before we send out sales order acknowledgments, we have our sales rep or inside sales rep review the sales orders that were created and then say, okay, yeah, everything's on the up and up. All of our terms were put into the sales order acknowledgement. The quantities and price look right, something along those lines for our human in the loop checkpoint. Mentioned this earlier, but we're going to want to create a prompt or template library with examples on what they would be used for, and then also guardrails or guidelines on how to use the prompts, when to use them, and what we can use them for. Again, we're going to need to train our users. So with that drafting tool mindset, that iteration mindset, and then also verification of the habits that our users are using the AI for. And again, here, iterate. So you want to pilot it, you want to measure, and then you want to firm it up or harden it in this case. And then you want to make sure that you can scale this out. Data protection and compliance. So classify your data. What's public, what's internal, what's confidential, and what's regulated so that everybody is very aware of what data that we're putting into these AI tools or automation tools. Again, set do not share rules and any kind of redaction or anonymization patterns. Um, when we're talking about AI for a business, enterprise plans with contractual controls is always going to be the way to go to protect data better, rather than just kind of like this open source AI stuff that we have going on. Enforce your single sign-ons, your multi-factor authentications, any kind of audit logging, things of that nature. And then also we need to validate any kind of vendor assurances. So again, any ISO, GDPR, SOC 2, those kinds of things. Again, make sure that everything we're using falls in line with those regulations. So one thing that we don't talk about much in the industry is kind of some self-hosted AI, right? And when would we self-host AI? So, if you have a private cloud and you have kind of your managed GPUs, private networking, and you have your enterprise control, there's on-prem GPUs. That's where you have the maximum control, right? When you have everything on-prem. Um, it's also going to have your highest operations burden because your hardware and everything, you have to handle that yourself, right? So on private cloud, you don't really have to worry about the hardware, you're VMing in, those kinds of things. But if you do have it on-prem, just understand the hardware and the patching and all that stuff that you're going to need to do. You have to manage it yourself. The other thing to note is that AI is a very high energy intensive process. That's something that has been out there in the news quite a bit if you're keeping up with it. So just know that, these machines take a lot of processing power, like a lot. And if you're using this enterprise wide and you're hosting it yourself, you're going to need to have some powerful hardware, right? NVIDIA has a really high market cap right now because they're the ones creating the chips to process all this stuff. So just keep in mind, if you're going to do it on-prem, you got to have a beefy machine. So let's talk about kind of some typical stacks here. So for modeling, we have Llama, Mistral Family. That's license dependent. And then you're going to do some fine tuning with your modeling. On your servicing sides, you have VLLM or TGI. There's API gateway, and they do have some rate limits going along with that. With RAG, you have the Llama index, language change, and then you have the vector database to basically hold that back. And you can see those listed there. For security, again, you're going to want your single sign-on stuff like that, vaults, encryption, logging. And then you're also going to want to put some guardrails in there for detection, any kind of filters, evals, red teaming, that kind of stuff. And so you can use these stacks to basically build up what you're going to be, how you're going to be using it, right? So whether it's a database holding back, a knowledge base, something that interacts directly with your ERP or different CRM, stuff like that. Your LLMs are like your chat GPTs, where that's the one where you're outputting a bunch of information, large language models, that kind of stuff. So choosing your stacks. So these are just some examples. Again, this is an exhaustive list. But Microsoft 365, if we're fully integrated with that and want to stick with that, then maybe you're using Copilot, or RAG and M365 ecosystem. For strongest contractual and privacy controls, you're going to want to go with some type of enterprise AI plan, with the DPA and retention controls. For data sovereignty, that's where we're going to have self-hosted or like a sovereign cloud that we control. So that's like that on-prem situation or privately hosted private cloud. Automations across our ERP, CRM, email. This is really where we have RPA or Power Automation layered around AI. That when I say that, that's where I have Fathom AI, then I have Power Automate, and then I have an output to ChatGPT. This is really where the automations take over and not just relying on AI to do everything. And then of course, you have your rules where you're optimizing your risk and adoption first, and then taking a look at the cost and what that's going to come out to build out your budget. So I wanted to wrap up here with kind of AI versus RPA and the core definitions here. So RPA, it's going to automate our repetitive rule-based tasks using structured inputs and deterministic logic. Okay. AI uses machine learning and language models to interpret data, learn patterns, and support decisions. So basically, RPA executes, AI reasons, and they solve different parts of the same problem. So when we're looking at AI and RPA, so AI can handle unstructured data, variability, and judgment-based work, and it will improve over time with feedback. RPAs are going to work best with stable processes and structured data, and it also does not learn. So any changes that needs to happen, you're going to have to go into the RPA or your bot, and you're actually going to have to update the code and make sure that it behaves the way that you want it to work. So use cases. So any work that requires interpretation, classification, or prediction, that's going to be in the realm of AI. So, you could have text documents, emails, images, voice, video, those kind of things for AI. It can take that, interpret it, and give you an output. And again, the decisions are going to improve with the more data it receives, feedback, and learning. For RPAs, this is where we automate high volume, low exception work where speed and accuracy matters. RPA is going to be 100% accurate to however you code it. And then also kind of legacy systems where APIs may be unavailable or impractical, right? So we may not be able to integrate AI with anything, but RPA bots, we can. Again, just kind of reiterating here that AI is going to handle the understanding and decision making, and RPA executes our downstream actions. So a common pattern here would be AI classifies what the action may need to be. RPA is going to route that, update the system, and trigger the actual workflows. And this is actually going to deliver a higher return on investment than either technology alone. Again, choosing the right approach here. RPA for execution heavy, AI for cognitive variable or judgment-based tasks. And if we really want to have scalable end-to-end solutions, we need to integrate both AI and RPA into our workflows to get the most value out of it. Here are some of the references and some further reading that you guys can use. I have the actual links saved off to the side, so I can send those over to you. There's a Stanford AI Index, NIST AI 1.0, Generative AI Profile, peer-reviewed experiments with Nguyen Zhang. I don't even know how to say the B name, and so I'm not going to embarrass myself here. But there's a lot more to go. But that's basically what I wanted to talk about here today. We got through that in about 45 minutes, so I will open it up to any questions that we may have.